I enjoy coming to work every day knowing that clients are depending on me to guide them through whatever financial needs they have.
Every client we have is different. And so it's really about finding out what's really the most important thing per client.
With financial planning, everything is interconnected. So a comprehensive plan means that you're taking care of income needs now, income needs in the intermediate term, and income needs long term. We'll do an asset cycle portfolio. We'll do a riskalyze test. We'll do a life insurance audit or a life insurance review.
And so when we build a deep relationship with our clients, then we can take a step back and then we can look at different options to help them specifically get to their goals. One of the things I feel our job is as advisors is to introduce strategies to clients that maybe they did not know that they were out there. But it's our our job to come out and say, have you ever thought about this?
And the planning it's not always about income, but a lot of it is also about the legacy. So the element of family is very important to us, and it's important to our clients. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Hampton Inn in Wyomissing, right next door to our office, so we feel right at home here tonight. Tonight's presentation is Legacy Planning. This is the first one that we've done in this fashion, so we've invited families to join along, so welcome to family members. And we're going to present tonight. It's going to be our team, which is Shannon and Steve and me, and then we're going to bring up our attorney, Stephanie. She'll do the second segment. So we want to keep this pretty informal. Ask questions as we go along, questions that come up. We'll have a question and answer period at the end. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. This is a subject that is pretty involved, and you have questions and you have thoughts, and we'll share with you the knowledge that we have. And I've been doing this now for 30 years, so I've seen a lot, as have my colleagues and as has Stephanie. So we'll share with you our knowledge, and hopefully you can come away with some good information. As you can see, we're going to be videotaping tonight's presentation on the PCTV network. So we have a TV show on PCTV. It's called Financially Speaking. So this is going to be aired on PCTV, but in addition to that, it's going to be on YouTube, and we'll make the video available to everyone who attends tonight. So you can share it with family members if they're not here. These are just disclosures that we are who we say we are. I want to talk a little bit about who we are and our process. We have a process that we started about 5 years ago, and it's called the Wellspring Formula. And with Wellspring, we went through a series of interviews with our clients about 5 years ago, and we identified 113 things that we do with our clients over the course of our relationship. So we're not going to go through all 113 tonight. We'd be here till midnight. But what I am going to do is share the 7 pillars, because we broke the 113 things that we do down to just 7 pillars. And the first one is wealth management. And I mention that because a lot of you view us in that capacity as wealth managers, and we do that, and we think we do a pretty good job at that. But we are much more than just managing your money, and we feel like we need to distinguish ourselves from other financial advisors in town. And the way that we do that is we look at other things that are important in your financial life. Things like risk management. So we have Steve who embarks upon our risk management team, and he does Riskalyze. So many of you are familiar with the Riskalyze process, and there's insurance that we use to manage risk. So that's a very important pillar during the course of your financial life. And then another important pillar is tax planning. So we always say it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And the tax laws are very complex, and we always have to stay on top of an ever-changing tax code, and we have to apply that to your individual situation, whether it's retirement accounts or whether it's inheritance or tax things that impact your financial situation. Income planning is really the cornerstone of what we do. Most of you have an income plan with our firm, and that's maybe one of the first things that we did when we got together, because that's an immediate need, especially when you retire. Then we have legacy planning, which is why you're all here tonight. This is really the next step. This is on to the next generation. How are we going to plan for the transfer of your assets, the transfer of your wealth? How are charities going to be involved with the legacy planning? So, and we have an attorney as our guest tonight. Stephanie's going to come up in a little bit, and we feel that's important to have another resource other than just what we know and what we do as financial advisors. It's important to have some legal expertise, and we're going to deliver that tonight with Stephanie. Charitable giving is another important pillar. I know in discussions with a lot of you, we know that charities are very important. So how do they play into all this? And a lot of this is intertwined with maybe tax planning and maybe legacy planning. It all is tied together. Then we have value-added services. So the value-added services that we do are like the events that we have, the special events. We just did one over the summer with identity theft, and that was very well received. We brought in an expert from Prudential on identity theft. And we do other things from time to time. I mentioned the TV show a little bit earlier. So these are just things that we do in the course of our practice that just add value. It also could be a second opinion that you might need, or one of your colleagues might need when it comes to their financial planning. We'll act as a sounding board. Okay, so 7 pillars, but you don't have to remember the 7 pillars. All you have to remember is one thing, and that is the Wellspring formula. Because all of our planning really boils down to that, the Wellspring formula. And really with the Wellspring formula, it's really our foundational approach. So some of you may remember from your geometry class when you were in school, this is a Venn diagram where we have 2 concentric circles, what matters and what you can control. And where these 2 circles intersect, that's where we live. That's the Wellspring formula. Okay? Because what's important to us is the why. The family, the occupation, and the recreation. The how, which is the money, that comes after that. So sometimes you'll hear an advisor start talking about money right away. We don't do that. We want to get to know the people that we're working with first, and that's why we have the forum. And then, of course, philosophically, we look at the 3 Ps, the philosophy, the planning, and the process. Okay, so all this boils down to the Wellspring formula. So that's the big picture, and why you're here tonight is we're talking about the legacy planning. So I'm going to take a minute to go over the line items that we're going to talk about tonight. So the first part is going to be our team, and then we're going to bring up Stephanie to talk about some of the legal ramifications of planning. So what we're going to talk about are naming the proper beneficiaries on your accounts, which is very important. Shannon's going to cover that. Inheriting tax qualified accounts, inheriting after tax annuities. You know, the annuity planning, it becomes a very integral part of this. Taxing inherited accounts, you know, it becomes very complex when someone dies, and it depends who inherits the money and how we're going to treat that from a tax standpoint. We're going to talk a little bit about life insurance and how life insurance fits into a financial plan, because there's some tax benefits that come with the life insurance. And then a very important topic, especially when you're talking about the legacy, is long-term care. And long-term care is a very hot topic because people are living longer. So because they're living longer, that, you know, shifts the risk to people that are living in their 80s and their 90s. And of course, the cost of long-term care is so expensive, and it's getting more and more expensive. And they can't build these long-term care facilities fast enough because so many people are going into them. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. And with that, I'm going to bring up Shannon. She's going to talk about beneficiaries.
Okay, as we get into the legacy planning content this evening, we're going to start with the basics. So the first topic that we want to discuss is setting up your beneficiaries. So most people are aware that you can assign two different types of beneficiaries, your primary beneficiaries and your contingent beneficiaries. What we found is that many people have taken care of setting up primary beneficiaries. Most popular is to list someone's spouse as a primary. Now, where a lot of people fall short, however, is they forget to or choose not to assign contingent beneficiaries, thinking that, well, you know, if I pass, my spouse is going to inherit this, and then, you know, they'll be able to assign their own beneficiaries. But what people forget to consider is that there is a slim chance that you could pass away together. If that's the case, you want to assign to whom your funds will be sent, or who is going to inherit those funds. It's very important to establish both primary and contingent beneficiaries on every account. So it's popular to assign beneficiaries automatically on certain types of accounts like tax-deferred accounts, IRAs, 401ks, annuities. They're actually part of the application. All the applications I've ever seen always ask you to assign a beneficiary. What's less popular or lesser known is that you can also assign beneficiaries to your joint accounts, anything that's not tax qualified, you know, being an individual brokerage account, anything like that. Even bank accounts you can assign beneficiaries to. So it's not part of the application, which kind of baffles me, but there are extra forms that you can fill out when establishing these accounts, or even if they're already established. It's as simple as contacting your investment company, or if you're a client of ours, somebody on our team, and requesting a form. So you can establish that, and what that is called in any non-tax qualified account is a transfer on death form. You'll know that you've assigned it as a transfer on death account if on your statement, after your name, it lists the initials TOD, standing for transfer on death. That's the most common form of how they indicate that, but sometimes you'll see it referred to as a POD, or payable on death. So what happens if no beneficiary is listed? Why is it important to list a beneficiary? Most people say, well, it's just going to go through my will. I have a will. I don't need to also list a beneficiary. Well, if you do not have a beneficiary assigned to your account, then your account and your funds will go through the probate process. I'm sure Stephanie is going to elaborate on what that is a little bit more later, but simply put, it is going to take more time. It is going to be public knowledge for anybody that wants to look into what you have left behind. It will most likely be more expensive because you're going to pay probate fees. And if it's a tax qualified account, it's also going to be taxed immediately. So By doing something as simple as just correctly listing beneficiaries, you're avoiding all of that. A lot of times it can be done very quickly to transfer your funds exactly how you want them to go. So it's very important to assign beneficiaries. We also recommend that you occasionally look into and verify that your beneficiaries are correct. Some of the pitfalls that people have is they have a very old account and they assume, oh yeah, I think I set up a beneficiary when I opened this account. It's in your best interest to verify once in a while. Once again, if you're a client of ours, simply call the office. One of our team will be very happy to look into it for you. They'll do it in a couple ways to make sure that we have the correct information. They're going to call the company and verbally verify who is listed as your beneficiary. They're also going to look at the paper file that you completed when you opened that application. They want to make sure that both of those things agree and they're correct. So I want to give you an example of a couple here who made assumptions about beneficiaries of a pension. So this was in the New York Post in 2005, and this is what happened to Bruce and Ann Friedman. Ann was a school principal, and she retired, and she was entitled to a pension of over $900,000. Well, she had been married to Bruce and only Bruce for the past 20 years. So she assumed, well, of course, my husband's going to inherit this account. When she pulled up her statements, the statements said that she didn't have a beneficiary listed, so she thought, I don't need to. He is in my will, he will inherit this account. However, on a technicality, Bruce did not receive a penny of that $900,000 pension. This is what he and they were relying on as their sole source of income in retirement, so he was left penniless on one small detail. So when Ann started working as a school teacher, she was not yet married to Bruce, so she assigned beneficiaries, 3 of them, including her sister. At the time that she passed, the only beneficiary that survived was her sister, so her sister inherited the entire pension. Even though she was married to Bruce, this is what Ann had put on that beneficiary form, and she never updated it. Unfortunately, Ann's sister was not willing to share any of what she thought she was entitled to, so Bruce was left destitute. So this is a good example. Don't make any assumptions. If in doubt, call your financial institution, call your financial advisor, and verify who you have listed. All right, Steve?
Thank you. All right, here we go. Okay, so as far as inheriting tax qualified accounts, first one is really the simplest, and that is just called a spousal continuation. So what happens is one spouse predeceases the other. Any of those IRAs would just go over to the living spouse, and then it just goes, it's their IRA now. Okay, so it's just a very simple process, no taxes paid, and it's really a good time to consolidate. If somebody has 3 or 4 IRAs, they can consolidate them into one with the surviving spouse. When we look at non-spousal inherited accounts, and really these 3 kind of go together, and when we look at pre-2019, the age for a required minimum distribution was 70 and a half, and then they had the Secure Act, which went from 70 and a half to 72, and there was a thing before 2019 was a stretch IRA. And so your children, for example, would inherit it, and they would only have to take out amounts on their life expectancy, which is much longer than the parents, and you only had to take little chunks out over their lifetime. But the Secure Act actually eliminated that, and then it has to come out in 10 years. And what happened is the government wasn't, not that they weren't thinking, but a lot of people said, okay, it has to be out in 10 years. I'm going to wait. I'm not going to take anything out. And the government was like, well, we didn't really, I don't know if they thought about that or not. Secure Act 2 comes along, and they went from age 72 for required minimum distributions to 73, but they said if the RMDs were being taken out by the initial owner, you have to continue to take them out every year, and then it all has to be out in a 10-year period. So that's when we look at that. Okay. All right. I'm going to.
It's me. Any questions so far on any of this? This is all very good information. Inheriting after tax annuities. So Steve alluded to the stretch out IRA and that being eliminated with the Secure Act. What hasn't been eliminated is your ability to stretch out a non-qualified annuity if you inherit one. So what that means is you can, if you inherit an annuity from a non-spouse, you can take minimum distribution payments on that and stretch that out over the course of your lifetime. So let's say, for example, a 50-year-old person inherits an annuity from their parents. They don't have to take distribution of that entire annuity. They can just take small minimum distribution payments and stretch that out over their lifetime. So a 50-year-old has a life expectancy of about 40 years, so they can stretch the payments out over a relatively long period of time. So that is still in play with an annuity that is not considered an IRA or what we call non-qualified. Okay. Now the other thing I want to talk about with respect to annuities is the predetermined death benefit or the restricted death benefit. So when you're listing beneficiaries on an annuity contract, you can exercise some control regarding how your beneficiaries inherit this money. So if you have a beneficiary that you don't trust with handling the money, handling the inheritance, you can put them on the installment plan. So you can say, well, instead of you getting all this money up front, Junior, you're going to get it over 20 years. So you're going to get a check every month for the next 20 years. So that way, you know, they're not blowing all that money on a brand new car or other things, and you can stretch it out. So this happens all the time. We have people that maybe they trust one child, but they don't trust the other one. So this is a simple way to exercise some control from the grave, as you will, in how your children, or it doesn't even have to be your children, it could be anyone, inheriting an annuity. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, now we get into taxation of inherited accounts. So someone dies and you're inheriting this money. And by the way, Shannon talked about beneficiaries, and when you have named beneficiaries on any contract, whether it's an IRA or whether it's an annuity or whether it's the TOD, that always supersedes what the will is, right? So that's a good thing because it gets money to the heirs a lot faster. You don't have to worry about the estate being settled. The federal estate tax annual exclusion is currently $13.61 million. Okay, so you don't have to worry about paying federal estate tax until your estate grows larger than that. Now that could all change next year with sunset legislation that's currently on the books. The Big Tax Act back in 2018, they made a lot of tax changes, but they said they're all going to expire, or the sun's going to set on these tax bills in 2025. So if it does, we don't know what the federal estate tax is going to be, but I will say when I got into the business 30 years ago, the federal estate tax exclusion was $600,000. How about that? So maybe I'm showing my age a little bit, but it's now $13.61 million. So some of us don't even have to worry about that. Now, with regards to state inheritance tax, here in the state of Pennsylvania, it's 4.5% for lineal descendants. children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, anybody that follows the roots of the tree. 4.5%, okay, direct descendants. Now, if the money's going sideways to siblings, nieces, nephews, 12%. If it's going to somebody that's not related to you, 15%. Okay, so that's the state of Pennsylvania. So those taxes, when are they due? 9 months after the date of death. If you pay it within 3 months, you get a discount. You get a 5% discount. So keep that in mind if you're ever the executor of an estate. Now, how are distributions taxed? If you have a traditional IRA or a 401k or a 403b or some tax qualified plan, how does that work? Well, you can't take the money out before you're age 59 and a half without a penalty. And as Steve mentioned earlier, when you reach the age of 73, used to be 72, used to be 70 and a half, it's going to be 75. For these young ladies sitting in the front here, it's going to be 75. The distributions are taxed. So there's a table that we use. It's called the Uniform Lifetime Table, and we use that to calculate we call it an RMD, Required Minimum Distribution. So that kicks in when you're 73 for most of us, okay? But you can take money out anytime when you're age 59 and a half, okay? Now, Roth accounts. Roth IRAs are very popular. They've been popular for the last 25 years ago. Congress approved the Roth IRA back in 1997. They approved the Roth 401k in 2010. Okay, so this is a way to grow money on a tax-free basis. Okay, so when you put money into a Roth account, you don't get a tax break on it. If you convert money from a traditional to a Roth, you pay the tax when you do the conversion. And then as a result of that, all the growth on the Roth account is tax-free. And it's tax-free over your lifetime, and it's tax-free over the lifetime of your spouse. And then when your children ultimately inherit the Roth account, it's tax-free to them as well. So this is a very effective way to do some planning. But as Steve said earlier, with the Secure Act, you have to take the Roth account out over 10 years if you're inheriting it from a non-spouse. So rules are different for inheriting money from a spouse versus inheriting it from a non-spouse. When spouses inherit these accounts, it's as if they own them themselves. They're not subject to all these accelerated distributions that happen when you're inheriting it from a non-spouse. Okay, non-qualified annuities. What happens when you inherit a non-qualified annuity? When you inherit a non-qualified annuity, you assume the tax liability of the person that you're inheriting the annuity from. So annuities are tax deferred. They're not tax-free, they're tax deferred. So all that tax deferral buildup gets transferred to the person that's inheriting the annuity, and they'll pay the tax as that money's distributed to them. And as I said in one of the previous slides, you could do a non-qualified stretch, so you're stretching the payments and you're stretching the tax liability over your lifetime, if that's a good planning option. And then after-tax accounts are pay-as-you-go. You're paying taxes as you go. So if you have a brokerage account or a bank account that's paying interest or dividends, you're getting a 1099 at the end of the year and you're paying taxes on that. as you go. So those accounts are pretty liquid, but at the same time, they're not very tax efficient or very tax friendly. So I put this slide in here so you can kind of see the history of tax rates. So the IRS has been around for over 100 years, and 110 years, I guess. And you can see that the taxes have gone all over the place, right? So way back, my laser working? No, it doesn't work on that. But in 1913, the IRS said, okay, we're going to tax people at 10%. And you can see it's gone up and it's gone down. I mean, our people down in Washington, they get really excited about changing the tax code. And they do it on average once every 3 years. So there's been a lot of changes, as you can see on this graph. And back in the 50s and the 60s, we had a high tax rate. The highest bracket at one point was like 90%. Okay, so people like now we say, well, we pay a lot of taxes, but the top tax rate in the year 2024 is 37%. So we didn't start seeing major reductions to the taxes until the 1980s. And the Reagan administration did a lot to reduce taxes. But stay tuned on this, because the one thing that is certain is this is going to change. And that's one of the challenges that we have on our advisor team, is interpreting this tax code and explaining it to our clients so they understand it and we can apply it to all the planning that we do. It's very important. So, like I said, next year we're bracing ourselves for tax changes. We've got a major election coming up, so we don't know what that's going to do to the tax code, but it's something that we keep our eye on. Okay, Shannon's going to come up and talk about life insurance.
Okay, so when we are addressing the topic of legacy planning, one of the best ways, most effective ways you can leave money to the next generation is via life insurance. Life insurance is a powerhouse when it comes to creating a legacy. So there are various different types of life insurance, but they usually fall into one of two categories. They are term insurance or they are permanent insurance. Term insurance is generally more popular with the younger generations. Its sole purpose is to provide a death benefit so that if they should pass prematurely, their remaining family would be able to continue carrying on the existing lifestyle, paying off any debts, etc. Permanent insurance, however, can also be taken out for the death benefit, but generally there are a lot more purposes or a lot more functions that cash value permanent insurance could provide to you. So think of it as term insurance is like leasing an apartment. Permanent insurance is like purchasing a home. There are a lot of different purposes for coverage of, obviously, death benefit. That is the number one primary purpose of insurance, why it was created. But also long-term care. Various types of permanent insurance could provide a benefit in the event that the insured requires long-term care. It's a really creative way to cover yourself. It is sometimes flexible in the amount or the time frame that it's going to cover. It is also very flexible in how you spend that money to provide long-term care. Many types of long-term care benefits obtained from life insurance do not require you to go into a facility. It can be used for in-home care. I've even seen it being used to compensate a friend or family member who is coming in to provide that type of care as well. Life insurance can also provide a benefit to you while you're still living and healthy in retirement. A popular way that some people use life insurance is in the form of what we call a LIRP, L-I-R-P. It's a life insurance retirement plan. That's because it's possible to access the cash value within a life insurance plan and to do so tax-free. So for those people that never had a Roth IRA set up, Roth conversion doesn't make sense for them, this is a good alternate way to be able to create a very high income for yourself in retirement, but have it be taxed minimally. And of course, legacy planning. In addition to just providing a death benefit, all of these other ways can benefit your overall legacy plan. Some policies will be very flexible. Maybe you need long-term care, maybe you don't. Maybe you are planning to leave a death benefit behind to your next of kin, your beneficiaries, in order to pay tax on what they inherit. So as Jeff covered earlier, anytime you leave behind tax-deferred money, your beneficiary is going to be required to take money out of that, generally completely emptied over 10 years' time. If you've left behind a really big nest egg, all tax-deferred money, that is going to create this tax headache for your beneficiaries. Of course, I'm sure they'll still be grateful at receiving an inheritance, but it would be great if you set it up in a way that there was a way for them to pay for the taxes that they're going to owe on what you've left behind. So life insurance is a really good way to protect that legacy. Also, one more word about taxes. Jeff went over the slide showing you, for most part, most people are going to be exempt from having to pay federal estate taxes. Pennsylvania, however, is one of the states that is not very friendly as far as inheritance. They tax nearly every single type of account that you're going to leave behind to your beneficiaries, with the exception of life insurance. Life insurance is one of the only inheritances that your beneficiaries will not pay tax on, estate or Pennsylvania state tax at all. So a couple of ways that you can fund these types of life insurance policies. Some people choose to pay in one lump sum. Think of it as the initial premium you pay for an investment. This investment is ideally going to grow. That cash value can still grow, but it's also going to provide a lot of flexibility in how it benefits you in the future. Other people choose to make ongoing payments. Maybe you don't have a lump sum sitting around, especially because it needs to come from something that you've already paid tax on. You can't transfer something like an IRA into life insurance. So they make ongoing payments, maybe a payment annually or monthly for the rest of their life, or maybe just a short period of time. And one of the more popular ways that people who are in retirement fund their insurance policies is through RMDs that they don't need as income. So as we covered, required minimum distributions, RMDs, are required for everybody who has a tax-deferred IRA, 401k, something like that fund, once they hit age 73. Even if you don't need it for income, doesn't matter. The IRS is going to require you to pull a certain percent, and that percentage increases every year as you age. A lot of people find themselves with more income than they really need, so they want a way to reinvest it. And if their intent is to provide a tax-efficient benefit to their next of kin, to their beneficiaries, obtaining a life insurance policy and funding it with those excess RMDs is a great way to do so. Okay, so Steve is going to talk about long-term care.
Okay, so when we look at long-term care, top one up there, if you think about it, is almost 3 out of 4 people will need some type of care. That's a pretty big percentage. Average stay, women is 3.7, and men 2.2, and then 1 out of 5 Americans, or 1 out of 5 65-year-olds will need long-term care for more than 5 years. And when we look at that data there, and then we look at the next one, which is the cost, if we say that long-term care is over $200,000 a year, and if for a female is 4 years, for example, the average stay, we can all do the math. It's $800,000. And this just looks at how it is increasing over time. So we look at, in 2030, the estimated cost of long-term care will have gone up 40%. And that's a big, big number. How do we actually take care? We have options in life, and this is going to lay out what sort of options do you have? The first one is if you want to self-insure. And as far as that goes, you know that you will choose who takes care of you. There is no wasted premiums into insurance. The bad part of it is that you can go through your money from that last example quite quickly. The next one is you have family. Again, you know who's going to be caring for you. It's less costly. But the big thing here is the emotion and the financial part of it. I've seen people that, if you have a husband that might be bigger than the wife, just in height and weight, and the wife really can't do much as far as helping the husband move around. Very, very taxing emotionally. The government, so we can say, okay, we're going to spend down our assets, and we're going to let the government take care of you. There's limited coverage for Medicare, and you do have to spend down your assets. If you're married, you keep the house, you keep a car. There's certain specific regulations on what you can keep to get spend down to qualify to get covered by the government. Then the last one really is transferring the risk to an insurance company. Protects your portfolio, and the tough part of it is you may never use it. When I first got, and we first got in this industry way back, there was one type of long-term care coverage, and it basically you just paid premiums, and that was it, and everybody hoped they never used it. And the premium goes away. I mean, the premium doesn't go away, but all that money is, it's not wasted. It's there if you need it. And then, it added expenses to the retirement budget. And with long-term care now, it's a lot different than when we first got in the business, where you can use a chassis of life insurance, and then you have the long-term care on top of that. So if you never go in, or I say go in because now most of the help is in your home, or a lot of it is in your home. But if you never use it for the long-term care coverage, then you have that death benefit that goes tax-free to your heirs.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming. That'll be the end of tonight's presentation. If you want to stay around and talk to us and enjoy the food that we still have over there. Hey, thank you very much.